My name is Elaine Walker, and at 32 years old, I never thought I would be publicly humiliated by my own parents. As a struggling artist from a wealthy Connecticut family, I always tried to earn their approval despite choosing a different path than my golden child brother Jason. When I arrived at their mansion for the annual birthday celebration for my father, I had no idea that this particular party would change everything. I certainly never expected to hear those crushing words from my father or witness what my grandmother Rose did next. Before I continue with my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments and hit that subscribe button if you want to hear how I went from being called a failure to finding my true worth. Trust me, what my grandmother did changed everything. To understand what happened that night, you need to know about my family. I grew up in a sprawling 6-bedroom colonial in Greenwich, Connecticut, where success was measured by the size of your investment portfolio and which Ivy League school you attended. My father, Richard Walker, built his real estate empire from the ground up. Starting with a single property in his 20s, he eventually developed luxury commercial complexes across the East Coast. By the time I was born, he was already worth millions. My mother, Catherine, came from old money. Her family had banking connections dating back 4 generations. She met my father at a charity gala when they were both 25, and according to family lore, she saw in him the ambition her parents had always valued. They married within a year. Jason is 4 years older than me. From the beginning, he was the perfect heir to the Walker legacy. He excelled at everything he touched. Straight A's at Exeter, tennis champion, debate team captain, then Yale undergrad, followed by Harvard Business School. He joined my father's company right after graduation and quickly proved himself by securing 3 major development deals in his first year. I was different. While Jason calculated profit margins for fun, I was sketching in notebooks and covering my bedroom walls with paintings. Art came naturally to me, breathing color into what felt like our monochromatic existence. When I won a regional art competition at 14, my parents attended the ceremony, but spent the drive home discussing Jason's college applications. Their reaction to my creative pursuits wasn't outright rejection. It was something more insidious. Tepid acknowledgement followed by redirection. "That's nice, honey, but have you considered business school? There's no real future in art." I tried. God, how I tried to be what they wanted. After high school, I enrolled in business classes at NYU to please them. For 2 miserable years, I studied marketing and finance, dying a little inside every day. I called my mother one night during finals week, sobbing, because I couldn't bear another day of spreadsheets and market analysis. "You just need to apply yourself," she said. Jason never complained about his coursework. That was the night I decided to drop out and transfer to the Rhode Island School of Design. My parents' disappointment was palpable. My father refused to speak to me for 3 months. When he finally did it, was to inform me that they would pay for my tuition but nothing else. "If you're going to throw away your potential, you can at least learn to support yourself," he said. After graduation, I moved into a tiny studio apartment in Brooklyn. To pay rent, I taught art classes at a community center while trying to build my portfolio. My work was starting to get attention from small galleries, but nothing that translated into financial stability. Just before the fateful party, I had experienced my first real breakthrough. A small but respected gallery in Chelsea had agreed to feature 3 of my mixed media pieces in a group show. The exposure wasn't going to make me rich, but it felt like validation after years of struggle. Throughout all of this, my grandmother Rose was my only true ally. She was different from the rest of the family. She had grown up in modest circumstances in Ohio before meeting my grandfather, who was already working for the bank my mother's family owned. Rose never forgot where she came from, even after marrying into wealth. She had a warmth that was absent in my parents, and she alone seemed to understand my need to create. "Your art speaks to something true," she told me once while visiting my tiny apartment. She stood before a large abstract canvas I had been working on for weeks. "Richard and Catherine have never understood that not all value can be measured in dollars." When she looked at my work, she really saw it, and through her eyes I could sometimes believe that what I was doing mattered. The night before the party, Rose called me. "I'm looking forward to seeing you tomorrow, dear," she said. There was something in her voice, a knowing quality that I couldn't quite interpret. "Is everything okay, Grandma?" I asked. "Everything is exactly as it should be," she replied. "Just remember that you are exactly where you need to be in your journey." I had no idea what she meant at the time, but I would soon find out. The day of the party, I woke up with knots in my stomach. These family gatherings always left me feeling inadequate, but I couldn't skip my father's 60th birthday celebration without causing even more friction. I spent an hour trying on different outfits, finally settling on a simple black dress that wouldn't draw criticism from my mother, who had once referred to my personal style as deliberately bohemian. For a gift, I had framed a charcoal portrait I'd drawn of my father from an old photograph taken when he completed his first major building project. It had taken weeks to get it just right, capturing the pride and determination in his younger face. I couldn't afford anything expensive, but I hoped the personal touch would mean something. The 2-hour train ride to Connecticut gave me plenty of time to rehearse conversations and prepare responses to the inevitable questions about my hobby and when I planned to get a real job. By the time the taxi dropped me at my parents' circular driveway, my palms were sweating despite the cool October air. The Walker family home was an imposing Georgian colonial set on 4 acres of meticulously landscaped grounds. Floor-to-ceiling windows gleamed in the late afternoon sun, and seasonal flowers lined the walkway in perfect symmetry. A valet took my bag as I approached the front door, which was opened by Teresa, the housekeeper who had worked for my parents since before I was born. "Miss Elaine," she said, warmly embracing me. "So good to see you." "You too, Teresa. How have you been?" "Can't complain. Your mother has been in a state all week preparing for this party. Nearly 30 guests coming." She lowered her voice. "Your brother and Amanda arrived yesterday." The house was already buzzing with activity. Caterers moved efficiently through the expansive kitchen. Fresh floral arrangements adorned every surface, and a string quartet was setting up in the corner of the great room. Everything screamed tasteful wealth, from the original artwork on the walls to the antique furniture that had been in my mother's family for generations. I found my parents in the solarium, where my mother was giving instructions to the head caterer. My father stood nearby, checking his watch and looking impatient. Neither noticed me until I cleared my throat. "Elaine," my mother said, kissing both my cheeks. "You made it." I was beginning to wonder. "The train was on time," I said. "Happy birthday, Dad." My father gave me a brief one-armed hug. "Thank you for coming." His eyes moved past me. "Have you seen your brother? He was supposed to bring me the quarterly reports to review before everyone arrives." Before I could answer, Jason strode into the room, manila folder in hand. At 36, my brother had grown into the spitting image of our father. 6 feet tall, with broad shoulders, and the confident posture of someone who had never doubted his place in the world. His wife, Amanda, followed a few steps behind, elegant in a designer dress that probably cost more than 3 months of my rent. "Here you go," Dad, Jason said, handing over the folder. "Revenue is up 15% from last quarter." He noticed me and his expression shifted to a practiced smile. "Hey, little sister, how's the starving artist routine working out?" Jason, Amanda chided softly, then turned to me with genuine warmth. Elaine, it's so good to see you. She gave me a proper hug, whispering, I love that dress on you. Amanda had always been kind to me. She worked as a pediatric surgeon, the one person in the immediate family who had forged her own path rather than following the Walker financial dynasty. I sometimes wondered how she had ended up with my brother, whose values seemed so different from hers. Richard the Hendersons just arrived, my mother announced, gesturing toward the front of the house where voices could be heard. We should greet them. My parents moved away without another word to me. Jason clapped me on the shoulder and said, We'll catch up later before following them. Amanda gave me an apologetic smile before joining her husband. Left alone, I wandered into the main hall, where guests were beginning to arrive. My father's business associates, country club friends and relatives, from both sides of the family filtered in, all dressed impeccably, and carrying expensive-looking gifts. I recognized the mayor of our town, a state senator, and several prominent developers who competed with my father's company. I made small talk with people who barely remembered me while constantly hearing snippets of conversation about Jason's recent achievements. Heard your brother just closed the Portland deal. Jason mentioned, you're still doing art. The subtext was always the same. Why couldn't I be more like my successful brother? An hour into the party, I overheard two of my father's friends discussing the big announcement he was planning for dinner. Richard's been planning this for months, one said. Quite the legacy move. I was refilling my wine glass when I felt a hand on my arm. I turned to find my cousin Sophia, my mother's sister's daughter, who worked as an attorney in Boston. How are you holding up? She asked quietly. That obvious, huh? Only to someone who knows what to look for. She glanced around the room. These gatherings are like psychological warfare. I laughed, grateful for the moment of understanding. How's life in corporate law? Soul-crushing, but lucrative, she said with a wry smile. I live vicariously through your Instagram. Your new series looks amazing, by the way. Our conversation was interrupted by a slight commotion at the entrance. My grandmother Rose had arrived fashionably late, as always. At 80 years old, she remained a striking figure, with silver hair styled in a sleek bob and impeccable posture. She wore a deep blue dress that brought out her still vibrant eyes, and unlike many women her age, she had resisted the urge for plastic surgery, wearing her wrinkles like badges of honor. The crowd parted as she made her entrance, stopping to greet various guests with the practiced ease of someone who had navigated high society for decades. When she spotted me, her face lit up. There's my Elaine, she called, making her way toward me with arms outstretched. I met her halfway, embracing her familiar scent of Chanel No. 5 and the faint peppermint she always kept in her purse. I've missed you, Grandma. And I've missed you, my dear. She held me at arm's length, studying my face. You look tired. Are you taking care of yourself? Trying to. The new exhibition is taking all my energy. Something flickered in her eyes. Good. Creation should cost us something. She lowered her voice. We need to talk later. There are things you should know before this evening plays out. Before I could ask what she meant, my mother appeared at her elbow. Mother, you're late, she said, the reproach clear in her tone. I'm exactly on time for my purposes, Catherine Rose replied smoothly. Shall we move to the dining room? I understand. Richard has quite the announcement planned. As we moved toward the formal dining room, Rose kept her arm linked with mine. Just before we entered, she leaned close to my ear and whispered, Things aren't always what they seem, Elaine. Remember that tonight. The dining room had been transformed for the occasion. The massive mahogany table gleamed under crystal chandeliers set with the fine china and silver that only emerged for special events. Name cards directed everyone to their seats, and I noted with a sinking feeling that I had been placed far from the center of the table where my parents and Jason sat, while my grandmother had been given the place of honor at my splank, father's right hand. As servants began serving the first course, the tension in my shoulders increased. Something significant was going to happen tonight, and somehow I knew it would change everything. Dinner progressed through multiple courses, each more elaborate than the last. Conversation flowed along with expensive wine, but I barely tasted the food or participated in the discussions around me. My attention was fixed on my father, who seemed unusually animated, and my grandmother, whose serene expression revealed nothing of what she had hinted at earlier. After the dessert plates had been cleared and coffee served, my father stood tapping his crystal water glass with a silver spoon. The room gradually quieted as all eyes turned toward him. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate this milestone with me." He began his commanding presence, drawing everyone's attention. 60 years. They say the first 60 are just practice. Polite laughter rippled through the room. When a man reaches this age, he naturally thinks about legacy. What will remain after we're gone? For me, that question has always been simple. Walker Developments has been my life's work, transforming skylines across the eastern seaboard. He gestured toward framed photographs on the wall, showing various buildings his company had constructed. But buildings, even ones built to last centuries, are just structures. The true legacy is in the people we shape, the next generation, who will carry forward our vision. He turned to look at Jason, who straightened almost imperceptibly in his chair. When Jason joined the company 8 years ago, I wasn't sure if he had what it takes. I didn't want to hand him anything he hadn't earned. My father smiled. I needn't have worried. He has exceeded every expectation, bringing in new clients, expanding our portfolio, and most recently securing the Portland waterfront development that will be the largest project in our company's history. Murmurs of approval circulated the table. Jason maintained a modest expression, though I could see the pride in his eyes. "Which brings me to my announcement," my father continued. "Catherine and I have made a decision regarding the future of Walker Developments and our estate planning." The room fell completely silent. Even the servers paused in their movements. "We are establishing a trust that will transfer ownership of the company to Jason, along with a cash gift of $2.5 million to expand our Pacific Northwest operations." My father placed his hand on Jason's shoulder. "Son, you have proven yourself the worthy successor to everything we've built." Applause erupted around the table. Jason stood to embrace our father, appearing genuinely moved. Amanda smiled proudly beside him, though I noticed she glanced in my direction with something like concern. I sat frozen, my coffee cup halfway to my lips. I had always known Jason would inherit the business, but the public announcement and the enormous sum of money felt like a coronation. And I was the forgotten princess, not even worthy of mention. But my father wasn't finished. He raised his hand for silence, and the applause died down. "Some of you might be wondering about our daughter Elaine." All eyes shifted toward me, and I felt heat rising in my cheeks. Elaine has chosen a different path. Against our advice, she pursued an art career. The way he said art career made it sound like a childish fantasy, something to be outgrown. While we have supported her education, Catherine and I believe that continuing to provide financial support would be doing her a disservice. My mother nodded beside him, her expression a perfect mask of parental concern. "We've always encouraged self-reliance," she added. My father's gaze finally met mine, directly across the long table. "You're 32 years old, Elaine. You've made your choices, and now you need to handle your own life. The safety net has to come off sometime." The room had grown unbearably quiet. I could hear the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Let's be honest. My father continued, his voice hardening slightly. Your brother has built something real. He's created value. After 10 years pursuing your passion, what do you have to show for it? A few paintings hanging in cafes? Teaching art to children for minimum wage? Each word struck like a physical blow. I gripped the edge of the table, willing myself not to cry. I'm sorry to be blunt, but someone needs to say it. This artistic experiment has failed. You're a failure in the real world. It's time to grow up. Gasps rippled through the room. Even those who might have privately agreed with my father's assessment seemed shocked by the public humiliation. I saw Jason shift uncomfortably in his seat, while Amanda stared down at her plate, clearly mortified. My vision blurred as I fought back tears. The crystal chandelier above fractured into prismatic points of light. I had imagined many scenarios for this evening, but nothing like this. In all our disagreements, my parents had never been so explicitly cruel, so publicly dismissive. Richard, someone murmured from down the table. It might have been one of my father's older friends, sounding uncomfortable with the turn the conversation had taken. But my father had said what he wanted to say. He raised his glass to Jason and the future of Walker Developments. Glasses rose around the table, though several guests seemed reluctant. I couldn't move. My own glass sat untouched as I tried to process what had just happened. My mind raced through a montage of memories. My fifth-grade art show when my parents arrived late and left early. My high school graduation, when my father's congratulations came with a reminder that Jason had graduated with higher honors. My first gallery showing in Brooklyn, which neither of them had attended because it conflicted with a charity gala. I had spent my entire life trying to earn their approval while staying true to myself. And now, in front of everyone who mattered to them, they had declared me worthless. I felt a hand on my shoulder and looked up to see Sophia standing behind my chair. She gave a gentle squeeze, a silent show of support. Across the table, my cousin David, who worked as a music producer in Los Angeles, caught my eye and gave a slight headshake, as if to say, "They're wrong about you." These small gestures kept me from fleeing the room in tears. Instead, I sat straight in my chair, chin lifted, refusing to be broken. If I had learned anything from years of rejection, it was how to maintain dignity in the face of disappointment. Jason was now speaking, thanking our parents for their confidence in him, outlining his vision for the company's future. He didn't look in my direction once. His wife, however, couldn't seem to stop glancing at me, her expression torn between sympathy and embarrassment. I wasn't sure how much longer I could maintain my composure when a movement at the head of the table caught everyone's attention. My grandmother Rose was slowly rising to her feet. The room fell silent as Rose stood. At 80 years old, she still commanded attention with her regal bearing and penetrating gaze. She smoothed the front of her blue dress and looked around the table, making deliberate eye contact with several guests before settling her gaze on my father. "Richard," she said, her voice clear and strong. Despite her age, that was quite an announcement, very dramatic. A few nervous chuckles sounded around the table. "I suppose now it's my turn." My father looked confused. This wasn't part of the program. "Mother Rose, we can discuss family matters later if you'd like." "No," she said firmly. "I think now is precisely the right time while we have witnesses." She turned to face the gathered guests. "Many of you have known me for decades, but there's much about me you don't know. I've preferred it that way." I watched in bewilderment as my grandmother reached into her handbag and removed a small leather portfolio. Before I married Harold Walker, I had already established myself in a career that was unusual for women in that era. I was an art dealer and gallery owner in New York City. This wasn't news to me, though. My grandmother rarely discussed her early career. What surprised me was the murmur that went through the room, suggesting this was new information to many present, possibly even my parents. What most of this family doesn't know, Rose continued, is that I never stopped. When Harold and I married, he insisted I sell my gallery, as it wasn't appropriate for his wife to work. I agreed publicly. But privately, I established a new business under a different name. Over the years, that business prospered. My mother's face showed genuine shock. "What are you talking about? Dad would never have allowed that." Rose gave a small, satisfied smile. "Your father didn't know everything about me, Catherine. Women of my generation became quite skilled at managing our affairs discreetly." She opened the leather portfolio and removed several documents. "Walker Developments is certainly impressive, Richard. But RLM Fine Arts has been quietly building a different kind of empire for the past 50 years. My father's expression darkened. RLM. That's one of the most prestigious art investment firms in the country. Rose Louise Madison, my grandmother said, spelling out her maiden name initials. "I founded it, I built it, and I still own it, though I've had excellent managers running day-to-day operations for years." The revelation rippled through the room. I sat stunned, trying to process this information. My grandmother, who had always supported my artistic endeavors, had been a major player in the art world all along. "I've been watching Elaine's development as an artist since she was a child." Rose continued, turning to look at me with warm eyes. "She has what cannot be taught: authentic vision and the courage to express it." She handed the documents to a server and instructed him to give them to me. With shaking hands, I accepted the stack of papers. "These are the legal documents establishing a new gallery in Chelsea. The Elaine Walker Gallery will showcase your work alongside other emerging artists I've been following. The space has already been purchased and renovations begin next week." I stared at the papers, unable to comprehend what I was seeing. Property deeds, business registration, forms bank statements showing accounts with substantial funds. "Grandma, I don't understand," I managed to say. "It's simple, dear. I believe in you and I'm investing in your future. $2 million for the gallery launch and operations for the first 3 years. The amount nearly matched what my father had just given Jason. Around the table, guests exchanged glances of amazement. My father's face had turned an alarming shade of red. "But there's something else you should know," Rose said, her voice taking on a note of satisfaction. "For the past 5 years, I've been quietly collecting Elaine's work through intermediaries. Those pieces now form the core of a special collection valued at over $1 million. I gasped. "What? That's impossible!" "Not at all. Art valuation is partly about provenance and context. By acquiring your work systematically and placing pieces with certain collectors, I've helped establish your market value. But make no mistake," she added quickly, "I didn't purchase anything that wasn't extraordinary on its own merits." She signaled to another server who brought forward a tablet. Rose tapped the screen a few times and handed it to me. "This portfolio shows where your pieces currently hang. 3 are in private collections in Europe. 5 are in the homes of notable American collectors. And one," she paused for effect, "was recently acquired by the Whitney for their permanent collection." My hands trembled as I scrolled through images of my work in elegant homes and museum settings. This couldn't be real. My father had recovered enough to speak. "Mother, if this is some kind of joke to make a point." "It is certainly making a point, Richard, but it's no joke. Ask Harrison Pierce. He's holding 2 of Elaine's larger pieces in his Miami home." All eyes turned to a distinguished-looking man at the far end of the table, a real estate developer who competed with my father and was known for his art collection. He cleared his throat. "It's true. I acquired them through RLM last year. Had no idea they were your granddaughter's work, Rose. They're extraordinary pieces, getting quite a bit of attention from visitors. The validation from a respected collector sent another wave of murmurs through the room. My mother looked as though she might faint. So you see, Rose continued, turning back to my stunned parents. When you dismiss Elaine's career as a failure, you're not only being cruel, you're being ignorant about the very measures of success you claim to value. She walked around the table until she stood beside my chair, placing a protective hand on my shoulder. Your daughter hasn't failed. She's been quietly succeeding all along without your knowledge or support. The only failure here is your inability to see her worth. The silence that followed was profound. My father opened his mouth and closed it again, for once, at a loss for words. Jason stared at me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher, somewhere between shock and reevaluation. Rose squeezed my shoulder gently. Now I believe there's chocolate cake for your father's birthday. Shall we continue the celebration? The remainder of the party unfolded in a blur. The servers brought out a massive chocolate cake with 60 candles, and everyone sang happy birthday to my father, who managed to regain his composure enough to make a show of blowing them out. But the atmosphere had fundamentally changed. Where before there had been the comfortable certainty of established family dynamics, now there was confusion and recalibration. Guests circulated awkwardly, many finding reasons to approach me with newfound interest. I've always admired artists, said one of my father's business associates who had previously looked through me at family gatherings. Harrison Pierce engaged me in a lengthy conversation about my techniques and influences, genuinely interested now that he knew he owned my work. My parents remained at the head of the table, accepting birthday wishes and pretending nothing unusual had happened, though my mother's smile had a brittle quality, and my father drank more scotch than I had ever seen him consume. Jason approached me as I was speaking with Harrison. "Could we talk privately for a minute?" he asked, his usual confidence noticeably diminished. We stepped into my father's study, a wood-paneled room lined with books he'd never read and awards from business associations. Jason closed the door and leaned against my father's massive desk. So he said, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. That was unexpected. I said nothing, waiting for him to continue. "Look, Elaine, I never knew about Grandma's secret business, and I certainly had no idea she was promoting your work." "Neither did I said quietly. He looked surprised. "Really? You weren't in on this with her?" "Number, I'm as shocked as everyone else." Jason exhaled slowly. Dad's furious. Not just about the gallery announcement, but because he had no idea Rose had that kind of money independent from Grandpa's estate. Is that all he's upset about? The money? Not the fact that he publicly humiliated his daughter. My brother had the grace to look uncomfortable. That was harsh even for Dad. I didn't know he was going to say all that. "Would you have stopped him, if you did know?" Jason didn't answer directly. "I've never understood your choices, Elaine. I thought you were being stubborn, maybe trying to prove some point by struggling when you could have joined the family business. I never wanted that life." "I know that now." He paused. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry I didn't stand up for you more over the years." The apology surprised me. My brother and I had never been close, but we hadn't been enemies either. We had simply existed in separate orbits, his, filled with approval and opportunity, mine, with criticism and obstacles. "What happens now?" I asked. "With the company, nothing changes. I'll still take over as planned." "And with our family?" He sighed heavily. "That's more complicated. Mom and Dad are going to have to accept that their narrative about you was wrong. That won't be easy for them." Our conversation was interrupted by a sharp knock before the door swung open. My father stood there, his face still flushed, but now composed in a mask of parental concern. "There you are," he said. "Your mother and I would like to speak with both of you." Jason and I exchanged glances before following him to the small sitting room adjacent to the master bedroom. My mother was already there, perched on the edge of a brocade chair, her posture rigid. Grandmother Rose sat opposite her, looking entirely at ease. "I invited your grandmother to join us," my father said, his tone making it clear this hadn't been his preference, "since she's taken such an interest in family matters tonight." "Someone needed to," Rose replied calmly. My mother spoke up, her voice tight. "Elaine, we're concerned about this gallery plan. It seems very sudden." "Sudden for you, perhaps," Rose interjected. "I've been planning it for years." My father turned to me. "You must understand how this looks. After all our concerns about your career choices, suddenly your grandmother reveals this elaborate scheme." "It wasn't a scheme," Richard Rose said. "It was faith in my granddaughter's talent." "Faith that apparently required secrecy and deception," my mother added. I found my voice, at last. "Would you have believed in me if she had told you what she was doing? Would you have supported me then, instead of constantly comparing me to Jason and finding me wanting?" My parents exchanged uncomfortable glances. "We've only wanted what's best for you," my mother said. "Security, stability." No, I countered years of suppressed feelings finally breaking free. You wanted what was easiest to understand, what fit your narrow definition of success. You never tried to see the world through my eyes or appreciate what mattered to me. "We paid for your art school," my father pointed out. "Yes, while making it clear you thought it was a waste of money. Do you have any idea what that feels like? To know your parents? View your deepest passion as a foolish indulgence." Jason shifted uncomfortably beside me. "They paid for my education too, Elaine." "But they celebrated your choices," I said, turning to him. "They bragged about you to their friends. They saw your future as an extension of their success." The room fell silent as my words hung in the air. My grandmother watched the exchange with sad eyes but didn't intervene. Perhaps my father said, "Finally, we've been too focused on certain kinds of achievement." It wasn't exactly an apology, but from Richard Walker, it was as close as one might get. "What happens now?" my mother asked unconsciously, echoing the question I had posed to Jason earlier. "Now," I said, finding strength I didn't know I possessed. "I'm going to build a life and career on my terms with Grandma Rose's support. And you can choose to be part of that or not." I stood up suddenly, exhausted by the emotional weight of the evening. "I'm going home now. I have a gallery to prepare for." As I headed for the door, my father called after me. "Elaine, wait. This conversation isn't finished." I turned back one last time. "For tonight it is. I've spent my whole life waiting for your approval, Dad. I'm not waiting anymore." In the grand foyer party, guests were beginning to depart. Amanda caught my eye and hurried over. "Are you okay?" she asked, genuine concern in her voice. "Not really," I admitted, "but I will be." She surprised me with a fierce hug. "Your work is amazing, Elaine. I've always thought so." She lowered her voice. "Jason has one of your pieces in his office. He bought it anonymously from a gallery in Soho last year." This revelation stunned me. "Jason bought my art." Amanda nodded. "Don't tell him I told you. He was worried you'd take it the wrong way." Before I could process this, my grandmother appeared at my side. "I'm leaving too, dear. Shall we share a car back to the city?" During the long ride back to New York, Rose filled in the gaps of her story. how she had maintained her art business in secret even from her husband, how she had watched my development as an artist with professional as well as grandmotherly interest, how she had created a plan to launch my career properly, knowing my parents would never approve or understand. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked as our car crossed the bridge into Manhattan. "Would you have accepted such help if you'd known? You're as proud as your father in your own way." She was right. I had been determined to succeed on my own merits without family connections or advantages. "But the collectors who bought my work?" I said. "Did they only buy it because of you?" Rose shook her head firmly. "I have a reputation to maintain, Elaine. I wouldn't risk it on sentimentality. Every piece was acquired because the collectors genuinely responded to your work. I simply made the introductions and provided context." As we pulled up to my building, Rose took my hand. "Your parents love you, Elaine. They just don't understand you. Give them time to adjust their vision of who you are." I nodded, too emotionally drained to argue. "Thank you, Grandma, for everything." "We'll talk more tomorrow about the gallery," she said. "There's much to do." As I watched her car pull away, I realized that for the first time in my adult life, I was looking forward to tomorrow with genuine hope rather than determination to endure. Something fundamental had shifted not just in my family dynamics, but in how I saw myself and my future. The weeks following my father's birthday party were a whirlwind of activity and emotion. True to her word, Rose had already set much of the gallery plan in motion. The space she had purchased was a former factory in Chelsea with soaring ceilings and incredible natural light. Architects and contractors worked to transform it into a showcase worthy of contemporary art, while I wrestled with the implications of my sudden change in circumstances. My first challenge was accepting help after years of fierce independence. Rose and I had numerous conversations about the nature of her support. "I'm not giving you a handout," she insisted during one of our planning meetings in her Upper East Side apartment. "This is an investment, both financial and personal. You provide the artistic vision and work ethic. I provide business acumen and connections. It's a partnership." Gradually, I came to see the wisdom in her approach. Rose wasn't trying to control my artistic expression. She was creating a sustainable framework for it to thrive. Her lessons went beyond gallery management and art valuation. She shared wisdom accumulated over 8 decades of navigating a world that often underestimated her. "Never let them see your pain," she advised one afternoon as we reviewed portfolio selections. "Channel it into your work instead. That's where it transforms from wound to wisdom." I threw myself into preparations for the gallery opening, working longer hours than ever before. My tiny apartment became a studio where I completed new pieces specifically for the inaugural exhibition. Rose visited regularly, offering critique and encouragement in equal measure. One unexpected development was my deepening friendship with Amanda. A week after the party, she called me. "I'd like to have lunch," she said. "Just us." We met at a quiet restaurant near the hospital where she worked. Initially awkward, our conversation gradually warmed as we discovered common ground beyond family connections. Amanda revealed her own complicated relationship with my parents' expectations and Jason's complicity in the family dynamics. "He's not as confident about all this as he seems," she confided. "Your father casts a long shadow. Jason worries constantly about measuring up." "He's always been the golden child," I pointed out. "And that's its own kind of prison," she replied. "Every success is expected rather than celebrated. Every mistake is magnified." This perspective helped me see my brother in a new light. We weren't so different after all, just responding to the same pressure in different ways. Amanda became a regular visitor to my studio, often bringing coffee and listening as I worked through artistic challenges. Her outside perspective proved valuable, and her genuine enthusiasm for my creative process was heartening. My parents, as expected, took longer to adjust. 2 weeks after the party, my mother called. "We'd like to see the gallery space," she said stiffly. "If that's all right with you." Their visit was awkward. My father examined the construction, with a developer's eye pointing out issues with the electrical system and questioning the cost-effectiveness of certain design choices. My mother wandered silently, arms crossed, clearly struggling to connect this development with her image of me. "It's going to be beautiful," I said, trying to bridge the gap. "Would you like to see sketches of the layout?" My father checked his watch. "We have another appointment, perhaps another time." As they were leaving, my mother paused. "Your father and I have been talking. We'd like to contribute to the gallery, financially." The offer surprised me. "Grandma Rose has it covered." "We're aware," my mother said, a hint of resentment in her tone. "But we're your parents. We should be involved." I considered this. "Thank you for the offer. But I think what I need from you isn't money." "What then?" my father asked, genuinely perplexed. "Understanding. Respect for my choices, even if they're not the ones you would make." They left without promising anything, but the conversation marked a tentative first step toward reconciliation. Jason's evolution was perhaps the most unexpected. 3 weeks after the party, he showed up at my apartment, unannounced, carrying a bottle of wine and a folder of papers. "Peace offering," he said, holding up the wine, "and something I should have shared a long time ago." The folder contained articles about art investment profiles of successful gallery owners and statistics on the economic impact of arts districts on urban development. Some dated back years. "You've been researching the art world?" I asked, confused. Jason shrugged uncomfortably. "I've always been interested in your career, even when I didn't show it. I just didn't have the vocabulary to talk about it." As we shared the wine, Jason revealed his own doubts about the path he'd followed. "Sometimes I wonder if I ever actually chose this life, or if I just fell into the role everyone expected." "It's not too late to change direction," I suggested. He laughed without humor. "With Dad's health issues, the company depending on me, 2 kids and a mortgage, it feels pretty late." This was the first I'd heard about our father's health. "What issues?" Jason looked surprised. "He hasn't told you." "His heart. Doctor wants him to reduce stress, maybe retire earlier than planned." He shook his head. "That's why the big announcement and transition planning. Dad's trying to secure his legacy while he still can." This revelation cast my father's behavior in a new light. Fear not, just disappointment might have been driving his harsh words. As opening night for the gallery approached, unexpected allies emerged. Sophia offered legal services for artist contracts. My cousin David arranged for music industry contacts to attend the opening. Even Teresa, my parents' housekeeper, sent a handwritten card of congratulations with a small painting she had kept from my childhood. The Elaine Walker Gallery opened on a crisp November evening. Rose had insisted on a prestigious guest list, including critics, collectors, and artists. The space gleamed with perfect lighting, showcasing 20 pieces of my work alongside pieces from 3 other emerging artists Rose had selected as complementary talents. I stood at the entrance, in a simple black dress, different from the one I had worn to my father's party. This one had been designed by a friend specifically for tonight, elegant but comfortable enough for the long evening ahead. Nervous Rose asked, appearing beside me in a striking red ensemble that belied her age. Terrified, I admitted. "Good. It means you care." The doors opened, and people began to arrive. Critics I recognized from art publications, collectors Harrison Pierce had introduced me to, former professors and classmates, neighbors from my apartment building. Amanda arrived early, giving me a fierce hug before Jason joined her looking uncomfortably formal but genuinely supportive. An hour into the event, with the gallery filled with animated conversation and the distinct buzz of a successful opening, I spotted my parents near the entrance. They hesitated, taking in the scene with expressions I couldn't quite read. Then my mother straightened her shoulders and led my father toward me. "This is remarkable, Elaine," she said, gesturing to the space. "Very impressive." My father nodded, his eyes moving from artwork to the gathered crowd. "Quite a turnout." "Thank you for coming," I said, meaning it. Despite everything, their presence mattered to me. "We wouldn't miss it," my mother replied, and I heard the beginning of something new in her voice. Not quite understanding, not yet approval, but perhaps a willingness to see me as I was, rather than as she had wished me to be. As the evening progressed, I circulated through the gallery, engaging with guests and explaining my work. The validation was overwhelming. A critic from a major art publication spent 30 minutes discussing my technique. A museum curator expressed interest in seeing my next series. By the end of the night, red sold dots marked 7 of my pieces, representing the largest sales of my career. When the last guests had departed, Rose found me sitting quietly in front of my favorite piece, a large mixed-media work that incorporated fragments of letters I had written but never sent to my parents over the years. "Well?" she asked, sitting beside me. "I can't quite believe it's real," I confessed. "It's real," she assured me, "and it's just the beginning." I turned to look at her, this extraordinary woman who had changed everything with her belief in me. "How can I ever thank you?" She took my hand, her skin paper thin, but her grip still strong. "By trusting your vision, by creating without fear, and someday, perhaps by doing for another young artist what I've done for you." In that moment, surrounded by my work and Rose's unshakable faith, I finally understood what success truly meant. Not my parents' approval, not financial security, though that was now within reach. Success was the freedom to create authentically and the courage to share that creation with the world. 6 months after the gallery opening, my life had transformed in ways I could never have imagined. The Elaine Walker Gallery had established itself as a respected showcase for emerging talent, with quarterly exhibitions that drew increasing attention from collectors and critics alike. My own work had evolved, growing more confident and distinctive as external validation freed me from persistent self-doubt. The most profound changes, however, were internal. The night of my father's birthday party had forced a reckoning not just for my family, but for me. I had spent years defining myself in opposition to my parents' expectations, my identity shaped as much by resistance as by authentic desire. Now, freed from the need to prove myself, I discovered parts of my artistic voice that had been muted by defensive posturing. My relationship with my parents progressed in small, cautious steps. We established a Sunday phone call tradition, awkward at first, but gradually easing into genuine conversation. My mother made more consistent efforts, visiting the gallery for each new exhibition and asking questions that revealed growing interest in understanding my world. "I saw an article about your mentor program," she mentioned, during one visit, referring to an initiative Rose and I had started for young artists from underprivileged backgrounds. "It reminded me of how you used to teach neighborhood children in our backyard. You were always good at that, sharing your enthusiasm." These small recognitions of who I had always been meant more than grand gestures of acceptance could have. My father remained more reserved, but showed his shifting perspective in characteristic ways. He sent an architect friend to evaluate the gallery's expansion potential when Rose and I discussed taking over an adjacent space. Later, he called with suggestions for tax strategies for arts businesses. "Dad, did you research this specifically for me?" I asked, surprised by his detailed knowledge. A pause. "I may have read a few articles." It wasn't a declaration of understanding, but from Richard Walker, it was a significant concession. Jason and I developed a relationship that would have been unimaginable before. We started meeting monthly for lunch, sometimes with Amanda, sometimes just the two of us. During one such lunch in early spring, he confided that he had begun taking drawing classes on weekends. "I'm terrible," he admitted with a laugh, "but there's something satisfying about creating something with my hands after spending all week moving numbers around spreadsheets." "It's not about being good," I told him. "It's about the experience of making." He nodded thoughtfully. "I'm starting to understand that. Starting to understand you a little better, too." The most unexpected development came in April when Rose suffered a minor stroke. The health scare brought the entire family together in the hospital waiting room, old grievances temporarily set aside in the face of potential loss. Rose recovered quickly, her formidable will seemingly extending to her physical resilience, but the incident prompted her to speak more openly about her wishes and the lessons she hoped to impart. "Life is too short for grudges," she told us during a family dinner at her apartment after her release from the hospital, "and too short for living by someone else's standards." My father looked down at his plate. "Some of us take longer to learn that than others." It was the closest he had come to acknowledging his role in our family dysfunction. My mother reached over and took his hand, a gesture of support for what must have been a difficult admission. Rose suggested family therapy, presenting it as a gift she wanted while she was still able to participate. To my surprise, my parents agreed, and we began monthly sessions with a therapist who specialized in family dynamics and intergenerational patterns. During one particularly revealing session, my father spoke about his own father's harsh criticism and impossible standards. "I swore I'd never be like him," he said, voice uncharacteristically vulnerable. "Yet here we are." "Breaking patterns takes more than intention," the therapist observed. "It takes awareness and consistent effort." My mother revealed her fears about financial insecurity stemming from her grandfather's losses during the Depression. "I just wanted you both to be safe," she told Jason and me. I couldn't understand choosing a path with so much uncertainty. These revelations didn't erase the pain of the past, but they contextualized it, making it possible to see my parents as complex individuals rather than simply the architects of my insecurities. My professional life continued to flourish. In May, I received the Emerging Artist Award from a prestigious national foundation, a recognition that brought media attention and new opportunities. The morning after the award ceremony, I received a text from my father. "Congratulations, well deserved." Those simple words meant more than the award itself. By summer, Rose had recovered enough to resume her active role in the gallery, though she increasingly positioned herself as an advisor rather than a partner. "This is your vision now," she told me as we planned the fall exhibition schedule. "I'm just here to witness it unfold." One warm evening in July, exactly 6 months after the gallery opening, we held a small gathering to celebrate both the gallery's success and Rose's recovery. Unlike my father's birthday party, this was an intimate affair with only family and close friends. We sat in the gallery after hours, surrounded by art and sharing stories as the setting sun cast long shadows through the tall windows. My parents had come early to help arrange flowers and set up chairs, a simple act of service that spoke volumes about their evolving attitudes. When glasses had been filled with champagne, Rose stood slowly using a cane, but otherwise showing little evidence of her recent health challenges. "I'd like to propose a toast," she said, her voice still commanding despite her 81 years, "to transformation. Not just of this space which was once an abandoned factory, or of Elaine's career which has flourished beyond even my expectations." She looked around at each of us, but to the transformation of this family. 6 months ago, we were fractured by misunderstanding and rigid expectations. Today, we're learning to see and accept each other as we truly are. My father cleared his throat. "I'd like to add something." He stood uncharacteristically hesitant. "I've spent my life building things meant to last. Buildings designed to stand for generations." He gestured toward the gallery walls. "But I nearly missed seeing that my daughter was creating something equally enduring, just in a different form." He turned to face me directly. "Elaine, I was wrong about you, about your choices. Your mother and I both were, and I'm sorry it took your grandmother's intervention for us to begin to understand that." The room fell silent. My father had never apologized to me, not once in 32 years. "Thank you, Dad," I said. "Simply knowing anything more would overwhelm us both." Amanda raised her glass. "To seeing each other clearly." "To courage," Jason added. "Elaine's and Grandma's." "To art," my mother said, surprising me with her choice and its power to transform us all. As glasses clinked and conversation resumed, I found myself standing slightly apart, taking in the scene. My family imperfect, but healing. My grandmother, whose belief in me had changed everything. My gallery physical proof that passion could indeed become purpose. The journey from that devastating moment at my father's birthday party to this evening of genuine connection had been neither straight nor easy. There had been difficult conversations, setbacks, moments when old patterns threatened to reassert themselves. But we had persisted, each of us learning to see ourselves and each other with greater compassion and clearer eyes. I understood now that true success had little to do with bank accounts or public recognition. It lay in the courage to live authentically, to create without apology, and to offer the same acceptance to others that I had longed for myself. As I rejoined the gathering, Rose caught my eye across the room and gave me a slight nod, as if to say, "You've arrived exactly where you needed to be." And for the first time in my adult life, I knew with absolute certainty that she was right. If you've made it to the end of my story, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever been underestimated by family members who didn't understand your passion? How did you handle it? Drop a comment below. And don't forget to subscribe if you want to hear more stories about finding your own path despite the expectations others place on you. Thank you for listening, and remember that sometimes the people who seem to be standing in your way are actually preparing you for something greater than you imagined. Like, share, and subscribe for more stories of transformation and self-discovery.